Welcome to Grit with Wisdom. This is the podcast that delves deep into the inner psyche of mountain bikers from all aspects of our sport in order to discover the tools and the tactics that can help us have more fun out on the trails more often. Our aim here is to help you understand what it takes to push our own personal boundaries in the sport we love from a mental and emotional perspective. So today I'm sitting down here with Adam Van Luu. Adam is an all-round mountain sports extraordinaire, except he won't tell you that because he's way too humble. But when he's not out hanging off a rock climbing route, riding his mountain bike or training for a long distance trail race, Adam can be found working as a physiotherapist where he runs his own clinic out of Union Health and Performance here in Squamish. He works with people ranging from your everyday enthusiast all the way up to elite level athletes and a lot of the mountain bikers that train with Blueprint Athlete Development here in Squamish. And I think Adam is a super valuable asset to our community because he not only does his work as a physio, but he's also a highly trained concussion assessment and rehab specialist there as well. This has been a conversation I've been wanting to have for a long time now, as I feel like by now a lot of us in the mountain sports world understand that concussion is an injury that should be taken really seriously, but the do's and don'ts of the injury aren't always super clear to the general public. So we're going to cut through some of that today. Adam, welcome to the show.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me.
Man, super stoked to have you here. You had a good day out climbing.
Yep.
What did you climb today?
It was kind of a mishmash of things. I don't know who, sometimes I talk about routes here in town and people don't know, but we're projecting a lot of different routes just in Miram Park.
Okay,
so we went to
fantastic.
3 different crags and climbing more or less, spent the day kind of at our limits. So I'm pretty tired. My skin feels pretty raw, but it was good. It was a good day. Yeah.
Yeah, that's some beat up hands you got there, man.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I know, right? I know. The joints are pretty thick and gnarly.
Well,
That's good.
nice to sit down for a while there,
Yeah.
hey? Maybe it'd be cool to start off here. If you could tell us a little bit about who you are and maybe where you grew up,
Mhm.
and then how you got into mountain sports.
Okay. So I grew up in Southern Ontario, so a town called Barrie, Ontario. It's about an hour north of Toronto. I think most people in Southern Ontario know it, but in BC, you probably wouldn't know it. I grew up playing volleyball, actually, out of all sports, which is still actually one of my favorite sports to play. And then when I was in university, one of my best friends on the university volleyball team was a climber. And he quit the team. He quit the team about halfway through. We hit Christmas. He left the team because it was just too much with school. Never saw him again. And this is back before cell phones and social media. You couldn't really track each other down as easily. But I remember walking by our local climbing gym, and there he was. And he got me into it. And then the very first time I tried climbing, I was just hooked. Absolutely hooked.
Man,
Yeah.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
you started climbing in the gym there in Ontario. When
So-
did you first get outside?
Oh, it took me a long time. So I started climbing, this would have been 2006 or 7. So this is a while ago. And then I probably climbed inside only for 3 or 4 years. Yeah, before getting outside.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, I think here in Squamish, most people, they progress outside like in weeks or months, or sometimes their first experiences outside. So
I mean, yeah, the access to it here is
the
just
access
incredible,
is
isn't it?
amazing. Yeah, so I feel quite slow, in my progression. But yeah, about 3-4 years, and then I started going outside.
Fantastic. And it was that love of climbing that brought you here to Squamish in the first place?
100%. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were chatting at the start there. You're now not only a rock climber, you're also doing a bunch of other sports as well.
Yep.
Tell us the story of how you got into mountain biking.
Mountain biking. So I thought I mountain biked in Southern Ontario. Like I had a mountain bike,
Yeah.
I had suspension. I thought I knew what I was doing, and then when I came out here, I remember working with a bunch of clients that were mountain bikers and were telling me about the trails, and I didn't really know them. So I remember going out to the local mountain bike trails, which is a 5-minute ride from where I lived, and within 5 minutes, I was like, my bike is clearly not cutting this at all. Yeah, so I remember meeting a client who had a loaner bike. He was willing to loan out to me and take me out and show me around the trails. And I think the first day, I was like, I need to get into this. It was pretty awesome. Yeah, we did half Nelson, like a classic
Yep.
trail. Like we did half Nelson, pseudo, and then we came into Alice Lake and did something. Rupert, maybe?
Oh, that's great. I'm
Yeah.
so stoked to hear that you had a kind friend that took you on some good first trails.
Well, I mean, Rupert here in
Yeah,
town,
okay.
it's one of my favorite trails.
Yeah.
And I ride it, when I'm riding, I ride it all the time.
Yeah.
But coming from Ontario and not really knowing, like Rupert was pretty gnarly at the start.
I'd agree with that. I've
Yeah.
got a similar experience, like thinking I was mountain biking
Yeah.
down in country Victoria in Australia.
Yeah.
And then I got here and realized they weren't actually real hills.
Yeah,
These are real
that's right.
hills.
Yeah. Those
Yeah.
aren't real trails
So
at
I
all.
guess
Yeah.
half Nelson and pseudo, good trails to learn on. Rupert, maybe push it a little bit.
Yeah.
But sounds like you rolled with it.
My hometown is predominantly flat, and there are some hills, I guess, but like when you're pedaling up a hill, it's maybe honestly 10 minutes max. So when we were doing the climb trail up to half Nelson, and it was like 45 minutes in, I was like, where are we going? You know? Yeah. So it was pretty funny.
Yeah, I hear that. Very similar experience for me moving here to BC as
Mm.
well. And I actually came across you via a mountain biker,
Great.
𝗫𝗽𝗆𝗆, who
Oh
was
yeah,
on.
that's right.
Yeah, he was on episode 6 back when I first started this
Oh, no
podcast.
way.
But I remember seeing this crazy picture online of
Yep.
you climbing up, I think it was 𝗫𝗽𝗆𝗆 or
Yep.
one of the other rock climbing routes here in
Yep.
Squamish, and then you've got Matt Bolton riding down on his mountain
That's
bike right
right.
next to you. It's near vertical.
That's awesome.
What
Yeah.
was that like? I mean, were you kind of posing for the shot as you're
Yeah.
hanging off there? But you've got him a couple of feet away from you going quite fast.
I mean, for me, it was easy. I don't know how it was for Matt. And Matt, funny enough, me and Matt met through volleyball, which is such a funny little background
Wow, there you
like
go.
interaction. Yeah. But yeah, he had that idea months before that shot. And we had gone up there, I want to say 2 times before shooting it, where I rigged him up, on a rope so that we could start at the top and then go down the line, and he could map out the line exactly
Right.
where he wanted to go. So he broke it down. Like he broke down his line like the way that we break it down when we're climbing up it, like where are all the
Right.
features and where is everything. And then when it was time for this shoot, yeah, I'm just there posing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you're trying to figure out, the photographers are kind of telling you and laying it all out, and then you're just there to make it look kind of cool. Which is funny because like when you read some of the YouTube comments, they're just like, oh, like look how scared that climber looks. Like, I can't believe you almost hit him. It's like, oh, the whole thing is like very properly staged.
People think that he just dropped in without looking. Oh
Yeah.
crap, there's a climber there.
Yeah, that's right.
Come
That's
on.
right. But my heart was going crazy. I mean, like I didn't want to look up at him. But, like
Yeah.
you can hear him breathing, you can hear him steadying himself, and you can't, I can't even look down and watch him ride it out. But man, he knocked it out of the park. And he rode it once. He didn't practice it. It was just such a too big of a thing to practice. Plus, they had that transition ramp.
Yep.
But he rode it once, and he was like, and I think everybody was like, shots look good. Everything looks good. And he was like, let's do it one more time.
Okay.
Yeah. So
That's fantastic.
It's all Matt on that one. Yeah.
It's such a cool project you were part of.
Mm-hmm.
I think what really stood out for me there was the fact that he was able to abseil down and look at all the intricate parts of the route, because
Yeah.
I'm not sure when you mountain bike, but a lot of bikers I work with, and myself included, sometimes we'll get a little bit spooked out if we look at a roll or something for too long.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this guy was obviously looking at it for like a good half hour. He's up and down on the rope.
Oh yeah, maybe
Yeah.
even longer. But like when we climb up, you literally look at every single line and try to figure out what your moves are going to be. And,
Yeah.
and he did that just top going down. It was really, for me, it was super impressive to see that kind of approach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Especially when it is like it's a granite wall
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, and he's looking at really intricate features, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome.
No, it takes a lot of trust, I think, from both of you as well, just to be involved. And you're like, I trust you're not going to hit me, and he trusts that you're not going to move and get into his way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the photo was beautiful. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Absolute classic shot. So before we get into talking about your work here, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the sports you're currently doing.
Yep.
You've been training for a while now towards a really ambitious goal. You're actually going to be running the Squamish 50 trail race in 2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from
Tell
now.
us about that.
Yep. Squamish 50K race. It's a classic race. There's a lot of people here in town that know about it. I'm not a long distance runner at all. Like prior to starting to train for this, I was a 10K road runner, like at max, But we were talking about a little bit about it before. It's I was looking for a really ambitious goal to kind of fire for this year, and one that I really had doubts that I could actually do. you know, you can do a 23K, and I was like, I think 23K is really achievable, but I almost thought it was like too achievable. Yeah. So
it didn't motivate you enough to chase after.
It didn't motivate me enough. Yeah, I didn't think I'd be happy enough with myself if I could achieve it. So I was like, let's just really go after the 50 and then see how it goes. So yeah, I've been training for that. I've been training as much as most like legit runners train for, you know, because I'm still, a lot of people training for it. That's kind of what they're mainly doing. That's their main focus. But right now, climbing's still my focus. And
right. So this is a side focus for you.
This is the side focus. Yeah.
That's
so
incredible.
not the main focus. It's the side focus. Yeah.
Anyone that knows this race and knows the trails in Squamish, 50 kilometers, is that the one you're doing?
50 kilometers, yeah.
That is a long way to be running.
It's a long way.
And how many meters?
Yeah, it's 2,500 meters of elevation.
Holy crap.
I know.
That is a lot of that.
Totally. Right.
So what does your training plan look like? Like how long have you been training for it? How many times are you running a week? What distances are you up to?
Yeah, my training plan is not something that I would recommend to anybody at all. Like I'm kind of breaking every physio rule that I would suggest to people with my own training. But my own training's been 1 run a week. That's been basically it. Climb 4 days a week, 2 rest days from climbing, and then with my work schedule, it's been pretty busy. So it kind of leaves me time to run once. And distance was kind of like my big doubting point. So my first run was 14K, which was really hard for me. And then each week has been basically increasing that distance by 1 to 3 kilometers. Wow. Just kind of guiding whatever my body is telling me.
Okay, so you're listening to your body and not doing that 3 kilometers regardless.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, smart.
And the course is kind of relatively the same course year after year. It's available online, and most people kind of know it if you take a look at it. So I've been more or less running the course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So it's like and then
so a little bit more of the course each week.
Exactly, a little bit more of the course each week. Where I just run another K and a half or 2K out, and then turn around and come back, and eventually you build up where you're making loops out of it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so my last couple of weeks, well, now we're tapering off, but I had built up to 43K 2 weeks ago, which was the longest I've ever done in my life. So,
and have you come across any kind of like speed humps or hurdles along the way?
It has gone surprisingly smoothly. Like surprisingly, awesome. Yeah, I haven't injured myself, which I'm very, very like lucky. You know, there's a lot of stretching and rolling and stuff, and kind of listening to myself. But I think the biggest hurdle is probably nutrition.
Right.
Nutrition for these long runs is not something that I'm used to paying attention to. So that was an interesting thing to see what foods my body takes. Getting into like the world of gels, which I've never done before.
And everyone's different, isn't there? I know talking to runners and even endurance bikers.
Totally.
Some people like eating pierogies, other people like drinking flat Coke, and it's just like all these random foods. But it's like, what actually works for you?
I know. There's probably like a dozen people I know that are training for the race, and I've been asking them all, and literally they all do something like uniquely different. Yeah. So it's been a little bit of a fun thing to try to figure out for myself, I guess. But yeah, I'd say that's probably been the only hurdle. Because when I don't do it properly, you hit a major wall, and it feels terrible.
Totally. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people can even relate to that in their biking, just going out on a ride that's a bit longer than usual, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, maybe 1 Cliff Bar's not enough.
Yeah, that's right.
So I wanted to hit you with a deep question here. What is your why when it comes to going after really challenging goals like this?
Oh man, I don't know. I think there's just something really fascinating to me about the idea that I can't do something. You know, there's like something I know for me, playing volleyball at a competitive level when I was younger, I'm a really short guy, really short guy. So I was very often overlooked and cut from teams. And so it's my university team. I was cut the first 2 years.
Right.
Yeah, and at first I was like, this clearly is a level or a caliber that I don't belong in. I just don't have the skills for it. But that motivated me to keep trying harder and seeing if I could make it. So I remember making the volleyball team when I was in my 3rd year finally, and it was such a cool moment for me. So there's been a lot of times where it's like I doubt myself a lot. I think my friends that know me, like I have a lot of high doubt already. But there is something also super fascinating to me about thinking I can't do it and then trying to figure out a way of getting it done.
Yeah, man, that's a It's a fantastic backstory there. And I think it's so cool listening to that, because you could have so easily given up on volleyball.
Oh, for sure.
And then perhaps, started that habit of like, hey, I'm not going to do this rock climbing route. Maybe it's just not for me. I'm not going to try trail running.
Exactly.
But now you're kind of on this path of, hey, what if I can?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Or even if you think you can't, you're going to try it anyway, just to find out.
Totally. And climbing's like that too. I mean, the climbing grades, it's kind of endless. It doesn't matter how good you are. There's always going to be something harder that will shut you down. And so it's like you can kind of either be content where you are, which is completely fine.
Yeah.
And there's often seasons where I'm like, I'm totally happy where I am, or you try to push the next grade and it'll shut you down pretty hard at first. But if you persist through it, it's pretty neat where you end up going.
Totally, yeah. I think climbing, like mountain biking and any of these other sports, is such a great tool for self-exploration.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I do love that climbing has so many grades. I think it's sometimes easier to kind of feel the progress when you're going grade after grade.
Totally.
I find with mountain biking, we've got 4 grades.
I know.
So it's like, man, I've been riding black trails for 6 years now. Come on.
I know. I remember when I first started getting into like double black, and I was riding @ʗ𝗚𝗄𝗺 here in town.
Yeah.
Which is an easy double black.
It is. Yeah, depending on which lens you're looking through, right?
Yeah, right. And I remember thinking, yes, like I'm in the double black kind of like zone. This is kind of cool. But then all the other ones here in town are just so much harder.
Yeah, but you've got
scarier, right? Like
all the other grades that aren't within the grading system above there, right? Yeah, it's a crazy place to live. But like you're saying about climbing, there's always a level up. I think that's what makes mountain biking here so exciting.
Oh, yeah.
We'll never get to the top, and that's a good thing.
You'll never get exactly. Yeah, maybe the small percentage will, but like the average person we never will, which is kind of cool.
But I think it's a small percentage, guys like Matt Bolton, who are making their own trails.
Yeah, that's right. So, which I will never ride,
Me either. Mark my word on that one. Awesome, man. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the work you do. Maybe you could start by just telling us a little bit about the particular work you do as a physio and the kinds of people you work with.
Sure. I've been a physio, finished physio school in 2010. So I've been a physio for 13 years now, and predominantly work with everybody. It's like I work with high-level athletes, which is really cool, but high-level athletes probably only make up a very small percentage of who I actually work with. It's mostly weekend warriors and your typical Squamish community members, and not even. So some people that aren't active at all, that just got hurt on the job or hurt in motor vehicle accidents.
Yeah, fantastic. And do you think that is because the athletes are already doing a lot of the exercises, the stretches, that kind of thing? Or is it because there's just more everyday enthusiasts in town here?
Oh, this Squamish is amazing. Yeah, Squamish is amazing. It's everywhere I go as a physio, when you take a course, you always do a quick 30 seconds, like who are you, where are you from, where do you work, whatever. And every course I've ever taken, when they hear I live and work in Squamish, every physio instructor is like, that's the best, those are the best clients to work with.
Really?
Yeah, and I think it's because everybody here, most of us who live here or who moved here, it's like we moved here for some kind of activity. Either we're skiers or climbers or mountain bikers or kite surfers or whatever. And so when you get injured, it's like, yes, you care about your job, obviously. And yeah, you care about interacting with your family. That's important. But most of us are just like, I want to get back to biking. Or I want to get back to climbing or running. And so I find everybody here is really, really motivated, which is really neat.
That must make a huge difference. So they're actually doing the work that you're prescribing.
They're actually doing the work, yeah. Most of them are doing the work, But but they're actually doing the work, or they're actually being proactive about their health, which I find, my hometown back in Ontario is a really active community, but you just didn't have that kind of population. So it's been pretty neat to have that.
What would you say is one of the most common injuries you see?
Oh my gosh. I don't even know. You see, there's very common injuries for like very common sports. So it's like mountain bikers. Like I see a lot of knee injuries.
Right.
Like any knee structure that can be injured in a mountain biker seems to get injured. Concussions in mountain bikers. Yeah. Broken wrists in mountain bikers.
Yeah.
Climbers, we tend to get a lot of like pulley injuries. So like these very specific type of finger injuries or shoulder injuries. Runners may get tons of running, hip, knee, ankle related injuries. Yeah, you see
all across the board.
It's across the board for sure. Yeah.
Let's talk concussion here. I'd love to ask you, like, in your mind, what defines a concussion?
Oh man, a concussion is like, in all honesty, a concussion is more of like a syndrome. It's like when you look up the definition, they'll call it a syndrome. It's like a collection of signs and symptoms, but it's usually either hit to the head, you don't even need a direct hit to the head. It can be just an indirect hit to the body that causes like an acceleration, deceleration kind of force. Because this sounds super dramatic, but your brain can actually hit the inside of your skull with enough trauma. And it's that direct hit or indirect hit that causes all of these collection of symptoms that they recognize that makes a concussion injury.
I see. So it's that movement of the brain. So whether the head's being hit and that's causing the brain to move against the skull, or whether it's more of a whiplash effect. Is that what
exactly. Yeah.
Right. So I think it's what we've learned in recent years and what people are becoming aware of is it's a lot more common than we thought.
Oh, it's so common. Yeah, it's so common.
I know in the past it was like, you just a little knock to the head, you're all good.
I
but
know.
Not necessarily the case.
Yeah, people just didn't know. You know, and to be honest, it's like a formal scientific definition of a concussion didn't even exist till like 23 years ago.
Yeah.
I think the year 2000, I think, is when the first original, 2000 or 2010 is when the first definition came out, and they're always refining it, but people just didn't really truly understand it.
Yeah, it's crazy how recent all of those studies have taken place, but it's also really cool to know how far we've come in this realm and the kind of treatment options that are out there now.
Yeah.
What are some of the signs and symptoms that you're seeing in patients? You know, I've hit my head out right in РUPET.
Yeah.
What will that typically look like?
Yeah, you know, like in our field, there's a list of 22 recognized signs and symptoms. Yeah, which is a lot. I know, it's a lot, right?
What are some of the most common ones you see there?
Your most common ones are going to be headache, dizziness, nausea, fogginess. But it's like I could probably list a dozen of them, and people would be like, "I've probably experienced that before." Fatigue, anxiety, blurry vision, ringing in your ears, neck pain, confusion, even like really high, irregular, like emotional states. Some people just like, I cry more often, or I'm more frustrated and nervous and anxious than I used to be. Like those are all super common concussion symptoms. I generally tell people it's like if you hit your head and within 24 hours you just don't feel right. Something just feels off. Even if you can't put a finger on it, you're like, I don't know what this is, but something's just a little bit off. And it's like you probably have a concussion. Yeah.
Yeah, that's some good insight there. Have you had a concussion yourself in any of your sports?
Yeah, I've had 3. Yeah. So
and all spaced apart or close together?
All spaced apart, luckily. 2 from mountain biking here in Squamish. I think the last one was pre-COVID, so 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And then 1 from snowboarding when I was younger, when you used to snowboard without a helmet, because nobody did in the 90s. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Like we were wearing helmets for bikes back then, but no one was wearing helmets for snowboarding.
I used to ride my bike to school, which would take me like an hour to get to school on my bike, and didn't have a helmet.
Right.
And my parents wouldn't even be like, "Oh, where's your helmet?" They'd be like, "Hey, see you later." Yeah, it's pretty wild.
It's crazy how much just that social norm has changed in 10, 20 years, in a good way, of course.
Yeah.
It's fantastic now that you can't ride, your pub bike or whatever without a helmet, without someone saying, "Hey, dude, put a helmet on."
Totally.
Yeah, that's a good thing for sure. So I wanted to talk about the current recommendations and treatment for concussion.
Yep.
And I'd love to know how that's changed in recent years as well, because I know there's lots of information out there and some of it's conflicting.
It is, yeah. So it's like, a lot of people don't even know that you can do physio for concussions, which is really funny. I still run into people all the time that come into the clinic with a concussion assessment and they didn't know you could do anything for it. But a concussion assessment, honestly, the faster the better. So it's like within the first 2-3 days is perfect. Like a lot of times people think, wait it out. Like sometimes I'll get texts from people or emails from people and they'll be like, I just hit my head yesterday, is it too soon? And it's like, not at all. Like get yourself in today and then let's take a look at it. So there's a lot of different systems that we scan when it comes to concussion, because the hard part is when you hit your head, sometimes what I tell people, when you hit your head, there's like 5 or 6 different systems that can all get impaired.
Right.
And an impairment to any one of those systems can give you all of the same symptoms. Right. So it's like you kind of have to like systematically go through each system one at a time to figure it out. And like the analogy I use sometimes is like, imagine you have a lake that's being fed by 6 different rivers. And like that lake's full of pollution and we know it's coming from a river, but we don't know which one. It's like, if you really want to do your due diligence and figure it out, you got to systematically scan the entirety of each river feeding into it to figure out where it's coming from. Yeah, so
that's a really good way of looking at it.
Yeah, right. So usually when I see somebody, it's like we literally just start on system 1 and scan through. And if that system's not working properly, it's like, I won't even have to tell you. It's like, I'll scan your eye movements and you'll be like, this is making me feel like trash. And then it's like, okay, we know that system's not working and this is a concussion for sure.
Right. And does that come, these different systems, does that come from hitting the head in different places or in different
Oh man, what a good
ways?
question. They don't know.
Right.
Yeah, they don't know. It's taken decades of research. Like if you really read it and trace it back, it's taken decades of research to even figure out what systems were involved in the first place.
Okay.
You know, yeah, there'd be like, I would read these studies from like the military, like American military, Canadian military from like 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And they'd be like, yeah, we've noticed that like people's eyes don't track properly after like an explosion close to them, and we don't know what that is. And so like, let's run the statistical analyses and see, and they would just see, okay, yeah, every single out of 1,000 people that have explosions that happen close to them or from contact, there's these 5 or 6 visual movements that just kind of stop working after a while. Yeah, so it's taken years to figure it all out, but yeah, every concussion is totally different. You can get hit in the exact same spot, the exact same way, same force, same speed, same everything, and maybe it presents, honestly, 3 completely different ways.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And I think some people may know this already, but I think it's an important point to touch on. Why, when you get one concussion, if you get another one straight afterwards, is that so bad?
Yeah, it's bad because of the inflammation.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like your brain sits in a really finite enclosed space. It's like you've got your brain, you've got your skull, and you've got a very thin amount of fluid that protects your brain from your skull. And after a concussion injury, there is a little bit of inflammation that's there. And if you get a second concussion injury on top of that, there's a whole bunch of things that happen, but the main one, I shouldn't even say it's the main one, but one of the big risks is that sudden increase of additional inflammation, it's got nowhere to go, and so it ends up compressing your brain.
Right.
And then, I mean, that can be fatal, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, not good. So I think it's definitely, I mean, is it a recommendation you make when you see a patient that suffered a concussion? Is it like, hey,
Yeah.
mountain biking, give that a rest for how long?
Oh man, good question. It depends. Yeah, it's totally case by case, and it totally goes on like how you're progressing through all of the different systems.
Right.
You know, so I always tell people it's kind of like, imagine we have these 6 systems. Imagine you were about to go on stage in a Broadway play, and there were like 6 scenes that we needed you to really ace before like you got on stage. And say you like, there's 2 systems or 2 acts that you know in and out, but the other 4, you're only 30% there. There's no way I could be confident being like, okay, let's put Jacob on stage, because it's like, there's no way you're going to be able to do that successfully. Right? So it's like, we got to make sure all these different systems are kind of really up to speed before I can be confident with saying you could sustain another hit and be okay.
Yeah, I'm loving these metaphors. It's such a great way of breaking down this stuff. Yeah. And I want to ask as well, I know it's probably another tricky question and there's no one answer, but in terms of duration of symptoms, that kind of thing, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering or do wonder, hey, I hit my head today. How long is this going to last for? So option A, like I come to you, get treatment within those, first 2-3 days.
Yeah, it's hard. That's a hard question too. And it's like, it's not a great, it's funny because like you can interpret that answer like really positively or even really negatively. But like the research that's there says 80% of mild concussions recover within 4 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, so 4 weeks is a pretty short amount of time. And so usually I put kind of hard restrictions in place, like, and sometimes depending on how things are, it's like you can still maybe mountain bike, right? It's just really not doing stuff that puts you in danger of crashing.
Right.
But first 4 weeks, there's usually hard recommendations in place. That literature, to me, is like super dated and wasn't ever really performed that well. There's a lot of bias in there. So it's like, even though you'll hear it all the time, where they say 80% of concussions are within 4 weeks, for me, it seems 80% of concussions are more within 8 to 12 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like, generally that's pretty positive for most people. Out of that 20% that doesn't recover within those first 3 months, it's like, it can depend. Sometimes they recover 1 more month after, and sometimes you're looking at a year, which is hard for people, but.
Totally.
Yeah.
And does that become longer if they've left, the initial treatment longer after sustaining the concussion?
That's a good question too. I don't seem to see a trend in it. You'll probably find research that supports both yes and no, but I always think even if you left it for 6 months, if you start to work on it then you'll see pretty good results.
Wow, that's really positive. Yeah. And in terms of working on it, I know in the past I've heard all sorts of things like stay in a dark room, don't look at a screen, don't see too many stimuli, don't do too many things, don't talk to too many people.
Yep.
How would you generally recommend someone treats a concussion or works towards getting better?
That's an awesome question, and that's what we used to tell people. Yeah, so like when I first got out of school in 2010, and I would take your concussion courses, all the ones that were offered, that was your blanket recommendation is no stimulus. So it's like, black room, and people know this too, right? So they're like, no screens, no social interaction, no coffee, no music, no TV, whatever. In 2017, they come up with these newer recommendations every 3 to 5 years, where there's like an international body of all your concussion experts, and they talk and present research and whatever. And 2017, new recommendations came out that basically said what we were doing was totally wrong.
Wow.
Yeah, that was like, and they call it, sometimes they nickname it the mole syndrome. And the mole syndrome being, if we had 3 people that all had concussion injuries and they were really sensitive to light, and so we told them, okay, well, wear sunglasses all the time whenever you're outside. If there were 3 people, let's say 3 Jakes, and let's say one kept their sunglasses on for 3 days, one kept their sunglasses on for 3 months, and one kept their sunglasses on for 6 months, like hypothetically, who would have the harder time getting used to sunlight again? It would be the one that keeps their sunglasses on the longest. Yeah. So the general recommendation now, which is really funny, but it is do as much as you can, as normally as you can, until your symptoms increase by a certain threshold.
Okay.
Yeah, and then once it increases, then that's when you have to kind of peel it back.
Huh. You know? So it's almost like that idea of exposure treatment.
It is. Yeah. It's kind of like, that's kind of the phrasing that we end up using. I end up using with a lot of like my clients that have concussions. It's like, is a little bit of exposure. Your brain is going to react and try to protect you, and you have to just kind of allow it to process that signal a little bit.
Right.
Sometimes I tell people it's kind of like trying to get your cardio better.
Okay.
So it's like, if you're trying to get your cardio better and it's been 2 or 3 months since you've done any kind of cardio, it's not going to feel totally comfortable, right? It's going to be a little bit uncomfortable. But if you never hit that little bit of discomfort, your body has no reason to adapt, has no reason to change. So concussion injuries are kind of the same. It's like you got to feel your symptoms a little bit. And there's a lot of guidance and conversation with what that little bit is, because it's different a little bit for everybody.
Totally.
But you have to give your system that exposure to give it a reason to adapt and get better.
Yeah, well, it totally makes sense.
It does, right?
I can imagine, staying in a dark room with 0 stimuli, like,
totally.
I'm going to get depressed. I'm not doing anything I like. I'm not making progress towards getting better.
Totally,
I'm just sitting in my room.
Yeah, and it's such a blanket thing now, too, where sometimes people will be like, I watched a movie on my laptop for like an hour and a half, and then my partner was like, you shouldn't be watching anything. Like, that's bad for you, right? And it's like, clearly it didn't affect the system. So so you totally can.
So it's almost about figuring out, what takes you over that threshold and what doesn't.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to figure out what your limits are. I always tell people, like, the gambling community has the best slogan that I wish we like stole for concussion, but it's like, know your limits and play within it. You know, like for concussions, it's perfect. It's like you have to just figure out what those limits are, and it's going to be different for everything. You know, some people will say, I can talk to you for hours and it doesn't bother me, but I have a friend and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like the content or maybe even the tone of voice or something, but like it flares up my symptoms. And so then it's like, okay, now that you recognize that, it's like you have to just figure out a way of strategizing your interaction.
Totally. Yeah, that's some really good advice. And in terms of physical exercises and things you're prescribing as a physio, what does that look like?
Oh man, it totally depends. Yeah. It really depends on which systems we feel or I feel is impaired.
Right.
But honestly, on a general sense, right away, unless there's a strong medical reason why you shouldn't, it's like get out for a brisk walk every single day. Get your heart rate up a little bit, but in a way where you can still have a regular conversation. Yeah. And then again, within your limits. So it's like, say you get your heart rate up and within 3 minutes, your headache goes from a 1 to a 4. It's like, okay, your system's acting or reacting negatively. We should peel that back or slow it down. But honestly, if you're not going to see a physio for concussion, just good general safe activity, going for a walk, going for a cruisy bike ride, through towns, pretty safe. Yeah, and pretty healthy to do. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's good recommendations. And I think really positive too for people if they do happen to be so unlucky that they suffer a concussion. It's like we don't have to be locked in our bedroom anymore.
Totally. Yeah.
You can get out for a walk every day. There is
Yeah.
things you can do. There is specialists here in town that you can see. And I'm sure specialists are popping up more and more around the world now as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
I think just generally speaking, like physios are just getting better and more educated. Like when I graduated in 2010, and this is no fault of the education system at all. I went to a great school. I loved my program, but we didn't really even have a concussion unit,
right.
you know, just, yeah, which is crazy. Right?
Isn't it crazy? Yeah, such a
it was 13,
the vital part of our body.
Yeah, 13 years ago, right? But I think it was just, they just didn't have that education where now, I mean, I'd have to ask new physios, but I would guess that there's major concussion units in physio school now so that you're on a general sense up to date.
Totally. Yeah, because you can have the fittest physical body in the world and no joint pain and lots of agility and all of this, but if you've got concussion symptoms, you're not going to be doing any of these sports very well, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Super interesting stuff, man. Thanks for diving in there, and I'm sure, this has been really helpful for me, and I'm sure it's going to be helpful for listeners as well. I wanted to kind of circle back a little bit here to all of the fun stuff you're doing out in the mountains around Squamish and talk a little bit about the mental side of that. We were chatting at the start there about, I was like, wow, you're mountain biking, you're rock climbing, you're trail running. You mentioned you're doing some alpine hikes and stuff as well. For you, how have you managed over the years trying to balance doing all of these different hobbies?
Oh, man, it's really hard. Really hard. And I think the average Squamish person has a really hard time with it too. I don't know. When I first came out here, we were talking about at the start where I was doing too much. Yeah, it was like, it's a new location. Squamish is beautiful. Everything that I did back in Ontario exists here, but like kind of on steroids, you know?
Yeah,
so
it was a good way of putting it.
Yeah, so it was hard to do it all, and I was trying to do it all, and I was very, I realized I was kind of mediocre. I wouldn't say mediocre, but like not progressing at anything, not actually getting better, which is totally okay. But it's like, for me, there was like certain things I wanted to get better at. So nowadays it's like each season I kind of try to pick a focus. You know, like during COVID, climbing gyms were shut down. The climbing society was kind of like, don't climb if you can. And so I biked all year. You know, I think I logged over 100 days on my mountain bike, and that was like a very purposeful year of progressing my biking. But since then, I think these last 2.5 years, it's been all about climbing for me and trying to get better there.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome to hear, kind of like picking different hobbies each season, depending on, what you're feeling.
And like your stoke level can change too, right? Like I know for me, some years, even though I moved here because of climbing, some years I'm not into climbing anymore, you know, or some years I just don't feel like biking or something, right? Something changes. And so I think that's okay to follow that emotion, I guess, you know? Yeah.
Do you find you're more stoked, say, if you've taken a break from climbing, you've been mountain biking for a year and then you go back to it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. 'Cause it's just different cognitive aspects to that sport, different physical parts of that sport. And yeah, sometimes it's nice to take a break and come back to it.
Totally. I can totally relate. I'm much like you. I often feel a little bit like I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. But then when I really sit down and think of it, I'm like, hey, I'm happy with that because I get to do all these fun things.
Totally, right? Yeah.
I know I talked a lot with 𝗬𝗽𝗴𝘀𝗵, who you might know from Squamish here on this podcast, about the psychological aspect of that as well.
Yep.
When we're perhaps injured or perhaps there's, COVID or something going on, for some reason we can't do our main hobby.
Yep.
If we've got other aspects that we love, other sports that we love, it can be really helpful because we don't lose our whole sense of self and identity and all of that stuff as well.
Yeah, totally. I think probably on a healthier side of things, I mean, you'll find people that will have different opinions on all of it.
Totally.
And I don't think there's a right or wrong. But for sure, it's like I've definitely worked with people before where 100% of what they do and their network is mountain bike related. And say you have a torn ACL and that's like a year-long process and now you can't bike. A lot of times people are like, I don't see my biking friends anymore because, I'm not out there with them, and it gets pretty lonely and depressing. I know when I stopped playing volleyball, like when I graduated university and that was it, volleyball was over for me. There was and volleyball was my life probably from 10th grade on to the end of university. And all my friends were volleyball players. I was playing volleyball probably 7 days a week. All my clothes were volleyball clothes, right? So it was like when I stopped playing volleyball for the first 2-3 years afterwards, there was like a total loss of like identity, right? Like I just didn't know who I was or what I was doing, you know? So I think if somebody's really into one sport and then they lose all that because they do get injured or whatever, or because of COVID or other things, it can be a super lonely place.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for diving in and sharing that. And how did you work through that change of going from being like, I'm Adam, I'm a volleyball player, I wear volleyball t-shirts everywhere. How did you work through that?
I think that's around the same time I found climbing. Right. So I just threw myself into climbing.
Transition, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just transitioned to another sport, but then I also got like older and I don't know, theoretically wiser, you know. Yeah. So I just didn't place as much of myself into one thing, you know.
Right. Yeah, I can relate there. I think kind of as we go through our early 20s and whatever, we maybe settle in a little bit and become a little bit more sure of who we are outside of what we do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, for sure. Like when I stopped playing volleyball, I think it was like 23, 24. And I was like, if I'm not playing volleyball, then I don't know who I am. Right. But yeah, I think now being almost 40 that I know a little bit more of who I am. And that's not that big of a deal if that's part of me is gone, you know.
Totally. Yeah. And you've got so many other hobbies and so many other things to keep you busy now as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fantastic, man. Sorry to stop talking there so I can cut this out. Sweet. Wanted to ask you, you've been doing lots of climbing, lots of running this season. Yeah. What's been one of your biggest challenges lately in the mental realm?
Oh, staying motivated for sure, especially with the running thing, especially there's only 2 more weeks to go. And even though my plan is not a plan I would recommend for people, it was going pretty smoothly. But the last couple of weeks, I've just felt gassed, like just tired. And it could be from lots of other things. It could be from, you know, not the most optimal training plan, or it could be just work has been so busy. Could be stress, who knows. But yeah, I've been super tired and it's been hard to stay motivated when you're that fatigued.
Yeah, how does that feed into your internal dialogue when you're like, oh man, I'm 2 hours into this 4-hour run and I'm feeling gassed?
It's hard. Yeah. The internal dialogue the whole time is that like, I just want to stop. Just want to stop and go home. But then it's, I always remind myself that, this was an ambitious goal. And if you're going to go after ambitious goals, you're going to have those moments. And if you can push through those moments, then that's going to be the thing that makes you stronger. So every single time I'm able to push through, and I don't always, sometimes I'm just like, I'm going home. But when you can push through, it's like, I think when I reflect back on all of this, it's going to be those mental internal dialogue moments that I was able to win that I think is going to be the thing that I take away from all this and is what made me a better athlete, you know?
Totally. Yeah, it's huge because such hard battles to win. I think sometimes we're our own worst enemy, and getting ourselves out of the way so that we can do the thing we want to do can be the hardest part.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree there. And I'd like to know, this one might come more kind of from the realm of climbing or mountain biking, but I'm sure you do, like all of us, experience emotions like fear, doubt, hesitation, stuff like this. Have you picked up any tools or techniques that you'll kind of commonly refer back to now as an experience guy in all of these sports?
Not really. Yeah, I classically, like I've always doubted my abilities, and I still do a lot of the times now for climbing, mountain biking, whatever. I think the best thing, the thing that's helped me the most, is not keeping that to myself. It's like the more I open up and talk about those doubts to other people, the more it's helpful, you know, where usually everyone has those doubts. And so then when you can talk through it, or listen to somebody who, you know, I've got a lot of friends that are way stronger than I am. And so it's cool listening to them be in my position or know that they were in my position and see where they are now. It's kind of neat. So I think just verbalizing it and sharing it's pretty helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good point you touched on, like being vulnerable enough, having enough courage to voice, hey, like, I'm really struggling here. This is really hard. I don't know if I can make it, or I don't know if I can do this.
Totally.
And like you say there, I think that's one of the things I love most about doing this podcast. We start realizing no matter how good someone may look from the outside, no matter how proficient they are in a sport, no matter how much experience they have, we're all kind of going through some of the same challenges, just at different steps along the way, or at, we might be on different routes, but going through the same thing.
Yeah. We just need to know.
Yeah, right. Totally. And I think voicing it is a really powerful thing, because quite often our buddies will be like, yeah, I was struggling with that same crux move on this same climb last year.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is what I did.
Yeah.
Or just knowing that, like, yeah, that one's hard. That thing just sucks.
That's right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can ride down that now, but it still doesn't feel nice.
That's right. I like when people are honest too, you know, like, because there are times where I'm like, yeah, like I projected some climbing routes 20, 25 times and was stuck at a single crux move where I would fall 8, 9, 10, 12 times. And then when I climb with my friends that are light years stronger than me, for them to be like, oh yeah, this move, I hate it. I fell on that 50 times. It's like, no way. Okay, that's cool, right? Like, yeah, I thought it was just me, right?
Yeah, exactly. It kind of gets us out of our own kind of internal battle and realize we're all on this same challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One of the things that struck me when I first started trying climbing was this idea of sitting with your fear. You're maybe at that crux move, you're sweating, your hands are shaking, you can't see a way up. And it's a big mess around to abseil all the way down, you know, the 3-4 pitches, probably more for you that you've already climbed up. So you kind of got to work through that if you want to have a good day.
Yeah.
How have you found that's helped you then pursuing new sports like mountain biking, running, things like this?
Man, that's a good question. I don't know, like climbing is really funny because climbing is it's like, it's always hard until you know exactly what to do. You know what I mean? Like, so sometimes you climb. I remember when I was first breaking into like the 12s. I'm like 12A, I remember I was like, if I could ever be a 12A climber, it's like, that would be it. I'll be done. I can like kind of retire. And then now it's like when you climb a 12A, if you know exactly all the movements to it, it doesn't feel anywhere close to what you imagine a 12A should feel, right? So, but at first, it always feels impossible because you don't know where to go, you don't know how to hold things, you don't know where to take breaks, you don't know how to rest, you just don't know enough. And so I think climbing has been an amazing metaphor for me in terms of tackling life, because sometimes, you know, like with us opening up a business last year, it was very similar. It was like so stressful, but I was like, this is new terrain, new territory. I don't know anything about anything. So the more I familiarize myself and just like a climbing route, the less stressful it's going to become. So it's been helpful mentally to think about it that way.
Totally. Yeah. It's so cool thinking about all the things you can learn from, whether it be climbing, mountain biking, running, and how that applies outside of your life as well.
Yeah.
Such great lessons and such a fun way of learning them.
Yeah, for sure. It's the same thing with trail running. It's like when I first started trail running, it's like you didn't know where the hills were going to be. You didn't know where the turns were, or how long the trails were. So the first time I ran a new trail, it was hard.
Totally.
I just don't know where this is going. But once you do it a couple of times and you kind of know exactly where the hills are and how long things are and whatever, all of a sudden it just becomes like, I don't even think it's like my endurance is getting better. I think it's just familiarity. It's just been so much more helpful. And
almost being more comfortable being challenged. Right? If I took you down a new mountain biking trail today, perhaps it might be easier approaching that than it was when it was your first day and you were going down Rupert and you're like, how many of these rock rolls are there? They just keep coming.
Right.
Yeah. Almost like being okay with not being completely in control.
Yeah, which is I think super important to learn how to be okay when you're not in total control. And I think you just need, everyone, myself included, just needs that exposure so that you kind of get your emotions in check.
Totally. I wanted to ask you how you go about choosing climbing partners, what you look for in a climbing partner, because I think this can also apply to mountain biking, who we choose to go out mountain biking with, and how that kind of group environment either supports us or maybe doesn't.
I guess it kind of depends. I mean, like really the number one thing for me and a climbing partner is like, we gotta like each other as people. You know?
That's a big one.
Yeah, it's a huge one. Like even if it's like you're an awesome climber and I can learn a lot from you, it's like if we don't jive, if our energy just doesn't meet in the middle, then it's like it just won't be fun. So it's gotta be, we gotta like each other as people, and it's gotta be fun. But when I'm climbing hard, I like having people around me that are at the same level, if not just like a little bit better. Yeah, because then there's something that I can learn, you know.
Totally.
Yeah, from them. And I like people. I'm kind of a climbing nerd in a way, where it's like when there's a route, I really love talking. We call it beta in the climbing world. Yeah. So I love talking beta. I love being like, what do you do there? You know, like,
Totally.
are you crossing? Are you matching? Are you flagging? What's happening, right? And I love when people are into talking beta. Yeah, if you're not into talking beta, then for me, it's like, I don't know, it's like I can't learn anything, that way. So it's kind of neat for me to know what you can do in your length and your strength versus what I can do, and then compare it.
Sure, yeah, that's a good point. I think that really applies in the mountain biking world as well. We're maybe not calling it beta, but we're calling it like, what line do you take here? What are you doing here? Where are you pushing?
Yeah,
That
right.
kind of thing. And
When I used to mountain bike more and project lines, same thing. When I was looking at a new feature, I would love riding with friends that would look at the feature and really, like, in detail, like, this makes sense here, and this is what I think, and this makes sense here, and maybe avoid here, right? It's kind of neat versus somebody's like, oh, just go do it, right? It's like, well, that's not
it's kind of deflating when you ask someone for advice on how to ride something, and they're like, I don't know, just like speed will take care of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Just fucking
Never,
hope.
yeah, exactly. I've never thought about it. I just gotta go, right? It's like, well, okay.
Yeah, that was not helpful.
Yeah.
I'm curious, have you had any mentors over the years, maybe since you moved here to Squamish, unofficial or official? And if so, what's one bit of advice that kind of has really stuck with you?
Mentors for sport?
Yeah, climbing, mountain biking, even just buddies you've been out with that have maybe said something really wise, and you're like, hey, I'm going to remember that.
Oh man, yeah, I don't know. It's like Squamish I moved here originally for climbing, and Squamish is kind of where if you're strong, like if you're anywhere in Canada, if you're strong, I think this is where you kind of end up eventually, which is like
the ultimate proving ground. Right?
Yeah, it's kind of wild. So it's like, I always feel that Squamish for climbers is kind of like Manhattan for Broadway actors. It's like it's like the best, and maybe you were really good back home, but here it's like you're just not negating the things you've done, but like there's just so many strong people here. And in terms of mentors, I don't know. I think everybody I've climbed with here in Squamish, and it's become like a friend of mine, has something to offer that's taught me a lot. Whether it's like a calm demeanor or breathing techniques or paying attention to what your heart rate's doing or resting or even physical techniques. It's like I've learned so much in interacting with climbers in 8 years here than I've had 10 years back home. Yeah.
That's fantastic, isn't it? How do you manage the kind of self-comparison part? Because we are here climbing with the best in the world, riding with the best in the world.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's like sometimes it can be deflating, but I think for me it's inspirational. It's like, yeah, because again, all those people were where you were at one time. So it's like if you want to be better, like I remember when I was playing volleyball, and my dad would be like, the only way you ever get better is by playing teams that are way better than you.
Right.
Like if you're going to play teams where you win all the time, that you're not learning a thing. I feel it's like if this is a place where you genuinely want to get better, and again, you don't have to. That doesn't have to be a thing that you want to do. But if you want to get better, this is the place, because like there's so many people, no matter what level you're at, that are better than you. So this is a great place to learn.
Totally. Yeah, I love that attitude, embracing all the positive aspects of having high-level athletes here.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit at the start or earlier there about you helping a lot of people work through setbacks, work through injuries, things like this. I'm curious, these days, as you approach a setback of your own, whether that be kind of in the mental realm or in the physical realm, what are some of the things that you're doing right off the bat to manage that?
If I experience a physical setback, for me, that's easy, just given the line of work that I do. It's like just I go into immediate aggressive rehab mode.
Right.
So it's like if I injure myself, it's like I am rehabbing myself within hour 1 of the injury. Yeah. And that has been a savior for a lot of things. Yeah. I think there are a lot of injuries I've had where if I wasn't aggressive like that and let it stagnate, it would have been a much harder thing to kind of recover from. Yeah, physical side of things, I think it's just getting on it. Mental side of things, I don't know.
Do you ever get what's commonly referred to as like a mental block in any of your sports?
Sure, all the time. Yeah, all the time. But I think that's again going back to I think what we've talked about already is just surrounding yourself with a good network. Yeah, and opening up about it.
Totally.
Because sometimes I am climbing a project and I am stuck and it's feeling frustrating. I'm stuck on a project right now But it's, you know, when I opened up about how frustrating it is, it's like literally everybody around me that has sent that project is like, yep, like you're in the grind right now. You know, I was stuck for 9 straight sessions or something, right? So I think just opening up about it is honestly the most helpful thing.
That's a really cool one that I haven't heard on this podcast yet. So I love that piece of like opening up about it so that one, whatever you're struggling with is validated. And 2, perhaps you'll get a whole bunch of advice, a whole bunch of tools for working through that thing you're struggling with.
And sometimes it's like not even like I want advice. Sometimes it's like I just want to know that being frustrated is normal and that maybe you got frustrated too, right?
Totally.
And if you're like, I totally did, it's like, okay, now I feel better. You know?
Yeah, like it's okay to be scared. It's okay to be frustrated, angry, whatever else we're feeling.
Totally.
Yeah, that's a normal part of the process.
Yeah.
Man, I love it. Really, really wise words coming from you today. So we talked about, you know, the Squamish 50. We talked about your rock climbing and your mountain biking. As we start wrapping up here, I'm curious, is there any other cool projects you're working on or anything work-wise that you wanted to mention?
Not at all.
Yeah. I think we've got a full basket already of projects. Yeah.
Works good. Yeah, we'll be 1 year old November 7th. So that's pretty exciting. It's flown by. And I think for us, it's going to be over the next year or another year is just really smoothing things out and just continuing to grow and build. It's not even grow per se, but just ironing it all out so just things run smoother and smoother. So that's kind of the goal with work. And then running, I mean, this is going to be cool. I'm going to be super proud of myself if I can stay injury free and finish this thing in 2 weeks' time. And then I am going to retire from running. That's going to be done.
For at least a week, right?
I don't know. I think probably for a while. Yeah. I've been telling friends that, like, you know, if the day after the 50, it's like you stole my wallet from me and started running away, I wouldn't even. I'd be like, that's fine. Yeah, you did your research.
You're going to go get your bike and then chase them, right?
Yeah, I would love I can't wait to get back into mountain biking. Yeah, I haven't been on my bike this year, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I think even last year, which was a predominantly climbing focused year, I still got on my bike 30, 40 times. So it's like to not be on it once this year feels super foreign.
Yeah, and that's a commitment in itself, isn't it? To stay away from that bike and commit to just that one or two things.
Yeah, I've got predominantly biking friends that I haven't really seen. Yeah. They're like, when are we hanging out again?
Yeah, I can relate to that. I get injured or something. It's like I don't see my buddy for a while.
Yeah, so it'll be good to see them.
Yeah. Man, that's fantastic. So we didn't do a ride before the podcast today because you've got other focuses. We'll completely support that. We're going to have to get out for a ride
I know,
in a couple of weeks' time.
I know.
A couple questions here as we wrap up. I wanted to ask, is there anyone that you look up to in the mountain sports world and why?
I mean, in the mountain sports world, for me, it's climbers. Mountain biking I kind of fell into, but climbing's still my main mountain sport passion. And in the climbing world, there's so many people I look up to. You know, like there's blind climbers and climbers that only have one arm. You know, that are climbing hard stuff, and that's super inspiring to me.
Totally.
Because sometimes my mind goes to those dark places. Like, what happens if I lose a hand? You know, like, you know, is this done for me? So it's pretty neat to watch those climbers continue to do what they do and succeed.
Totally. Yeah, just those levels of determination and courage, isn't it?
Yeah, it's rad.
Sometimes it's like, hey, here I am, like, complaining about this. I've got a sore wrist or whatever like that.
Totally. Which is okay. You know, you're allowed to, and I'm allowed to, but it's pretty neat to see these people that have, like, persevered through that, you know, because I don't know if I could.
Totally.
You don't know until you get through it.
Yeah, it really puts it into perspective.
Yeah.
And what's one takeaway that you hope listeners remember from this conversation?
Oh man, you know, probably when we went back to the concussion piece, it's like, if you hit your head, it's like, honestly, just take 24 hours to pay attention to yourself. And if anything feels off at all, get somebody to take a look at it. Yeah, before it festers and turns into something that's way bigger than it should be.
Totally, yeah. Wise words. That's definitely what I'm going to be taking away from this conversation, as well as a bunch of other wisdom. Where can people find you online if they want to follow along your adventures or learn more about the work you're doing here in Squamish?
Yeah, you can basically just look. I don't really have much of a online presence.
Good for you.
I tried Instagram for a bit, and then it just got to be too time consuming. But my Instagram profile is still there. And if you just looked up my name, Adam Van Luu, either on Instagram or through Union Health, those are probably where you'll find me.
Yeah, fantastic, man. I love it. Thanks so much for the chat. It's been an absolute pleasure learning a little bit more about the work you do and also learning some of the tools you use to approach all of these great challenges in the outdoors.
Yeah, appreciate you taking time to talk to me.
Fantastic, man. Well, look forward to getting out for a ride soon. And, of course, best of luck for the Squamish 50 in a couple of weeks. I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
What's up, guys? Just one more thing before you hit the trails. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe and don't be a stranger. I'd love to hear from you about any topics or any particular episodes that you enjoyed, and even about any guests that you'd like to hear me have on the show in the future. You can find me on Instagram at _mind_mountain. This podcast, mountain biking, and mindset are all things that are very close to my heart, so I feel super grateful to be able to share these conversations with you. So much love to you all for taking the time to listen. I'll see you next time.